Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the seminar on the future of Europe. My name is Soili Semkina. I'm a Brussels correspondent working in Brussels. I work for Kauppalehti, which is the leading business paper in Finland. Today, I'll be hosting you this seminar. We're going to talk about a lot of very interesting topics today, such as the European values, the rule of law, the Finnish and Croatian presidencies, the European democracy and the European Parliament. But without further ado, I would like to give floor for some welcoming words from Mr. Jouni Ovaska. He's a Finnish parliamentarian and the president of European Movement Finland, who is hosting or organizing this seminar. Please, Jouni.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of European Movement Finland, I wish to welcome you all to the Future of Europe seminar. This seminar is an official side event of the Finnish EU presidency program. I would also like to welcome you to Helsinki. As you see, we have tried to arrange you the most pleasant visit in Finland. It's just started to snow this morning. I hope you have time to experience the unique atmosphere of Helsinki during your visit. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all our brilliant speakers and valued partners for making this event possible. Dear friends, there is only 2 months left of the Finnish EU presidency. At the moment, we do not have an European Commission, budget discussions are still open, and the new European Parliament is fragmented. Although there are too many clouds in the horizon, and there is a possibility that our optimistic vision may be not fulfilled in these 6 months, European Movement Finland urges both the EU institutions as well as EU member states to cooperate and push forward all the necessary decisions required to start the new term properly. European Movement Finland hopes that the legacy of the Finnish EU presidency would be a stronger and closer European community, a true commitment to the rule of law by all EU member states, and a way forward in many of the big questions challenging us both in Europe and globally. In these days, we need diplomacy. We need to find solutions to overcome the difficulties currently dividing European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I welcome you and the audience online to this seminar. I hope to hear true and straight talk from all your keynote speakers and panelists tonight. The legacy of the Finnish EU presidency and the current trio program is still open for debate. And it is up to all of us to seek the best possible outcomes to our common challenges. Warmly welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Ovaska. So today we'll be having 3 different sessions. In the first session, we'll talk about the rule of law and the European values. In the second session, we will talk about the Finnish and Croatian presidencies. And in the third session, we'll be talking about European democracy. We'll have some parliamentarians to talk about. We would first like to start with the panel. Please, panelists, welcome. Yes, and please sit over here and take a microphone. Finland is a small country where rules-based order, international order, has always been very important. But it should be important not only to a small country, but any country that wishes to build a sustainable and successful society. I would like to present to you our speakers today, our panelists today, from the left, on the right side, from your perspective. On the right side, we have Mr. Jouni Nissinen, the President of European Environmental Bureau, Mrs. Liina Carr, Confederal Secretary the European Trade Union Congress, and Ms. Maria Heider, Director of Public Policy Europe Metro. Please, thank you. Well, first, let's go to the basics. The basics are, so your microphones are ready and working. I would like to first start about discussing the European values. My first question is, what's the point of having European values? What is the value of having common values in Europe? Please, who would like to start? Ms. Heider, please.
Okay, I can start. So, welcome and thank you for having me here. Perhaps I just explain 2 words to my person. So I'm the Director of Public Policy Europe of Metro AG, so I'm representing the business side here in the panel. But I'm also Treasurer of the European Movement International, and it's an honor for me and for my company to be that. And then I'm already directly to the point of European values, because why is a company part or member of a European movement, the eldest civil organization for Europe we know since the 1940-80. It is because we are not only a European company, but we are a global company, but we strongly believe that European values should drive our business and our global trade all over the world, because we think values like democracy, like human rights, like workers' rights, like gender balance, and all these kind of things are really, really also key of the European success in business. Our economy is also doing so well in the world because we have these values. And that's why also the business should defend those values and to bring that also to the global places they are operating in. And that's, for the beginning, it should be that.
Thank you. Ms. Carr?
I would like to ask a question, or reply with a question. Can we imagine any society, let alone European one, without values? No, it's impossible. Every group, we can go even smaller, whichever group of people we are talking about, there are common values, there are common principles that hold this group, this society together. European values, European democracy, our social model has developed over many, many years. There have been many collective decisions that have formed these values, that have formed the social model that we now have. And unfortunately, we have reached a period in our history where this all is under attack. Democracy is under attack. The values that bind us are under attack. And also our social model has been strongly under an attack. So, as a representative from the European Trade Union Confederation, it is our daily job to fight for these values. Not just narrowly on workers' rights, the working conditions, health and safety, equal treatment, you name it, but in also much more general. We had a Congress just this year in May, and defending democracy and defending the values was one of the main priorities that was debated, discussed, and it is actually priority number 1 from our list of 15 that we put forward for the new institutional setting of Europe.
Thank you. Mr. Nissinen.
Yes, the European Environmental Bureau, which I represent in addition to the Finnish Association for Nature Conservation, aims at the well-being of both humans and other living creatures, and also aims at sustainable development and environmental justice. And so if you have these aims as your main goals, then the background values of Europe, you could also say of the conservative Europe, because there are also different kinds of European values emerging in some states which might not be that well connected to the charters or the founding charters of the European Union. But I'm not going there now. But anyway, so if you look at some of the European basic values like participatory society and justice for all and most of all a strivance towards peace, then obviously you cannot but conclude that if you really aim at environmental and nature protection and social sustainability, then the European values are so far the best invention in all the societies that has taken place on this planet to achieve these goals.
Thank you. Let's talk of rule of law next. We've seen some backsliding in this principle in several countries. Hungary and Poland are scrutinized under the Article 7 procedure that tackles this rule of law issues. How there has been journalists murdered in a few countries in the past few years and a lot of harassed. So why are we letting this happen? And clearly, I mean, the European Union has no tools to combat this. Do you agree? Ms. Carr, please.
Do I agree that European Union has no tools to tackle it? Yes and no. European Union actually has the tools to tackle it. But I think what we are lacking is the political will. Europe is very clearly not a federal state. It's a union with quite strong links, bonds between the different member states that make up the European Union. But when it comes to values, there are political tools that can be used. But in order to use political tools, there needs to be a common political will. I mean, yes, we could go into the details of decision-making, whether there is unanimities, whether there
political will, does it mean more Europe?
Not necessarily more Europe. I think it would, for me, it would foremost mean more common thinking, putting up more unified position. Because at the moment what we see very often is that especially when we are looking at the Council, how the Council, European Council functions, that a narrow single country interests, or sometimes a small group of countries' interests, are blocking the common decision making. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we need more or considerably more Europe. We need, I think what we need and what we lack are statesmen who have the big vision, who have the drive for the common goal and for the common good in Europe.
Ms. Heider, agree?
Yes.
More statesmen?
I would like to challenge it a bit, or look to it from a different perspective, because you didn't name that, but all of the incidents you mentioned happened in the so-called new member states. These are just 15 years or something like that in part of the European Union. And what I do is that we have been talking about that in the European movement already also several times, is that I accuse all of us a little bit from the western part or from the older member states that we left those countries alone in the process to democratize, to get on board market economy. So what we had really, and I'm German, so we are not, we are some centuries now a democracy, but you know where we come from. And I know how long it took that this country to become really democratic and now a defender of the rule of law by its heart. But when you look at the new member states, and it still needs another generation to become really in the middle of the democracy we are used to for centuries. And I think they need our help.
What is that? What is the concrete that makes a democracy? What is that help that is needed? might be lacking in some countries?
So first, you need something to do what you also can experience in other countries now when it comes to populism and nationalism rising. You have to teach people again about the value of democracy, and you have to make them experience that this is something of advantage, that this is something they can achieve. This starts in the family, and it continues about the municipality, and it continues on the next state of the level of the state. So they have to experience that they have a vote and that their voice is heard. And this is not only something what you miss in new countries, you also miss that more and more in old countries. And that's why people are on the street and they are protesting. We all got a little bit too saturated in the good years of the last century and lost a bit the momentum to discuss with our population about the problems they face. What you have been mentioning in your first contribution, these are real problems. And people start thinking about the democracy and the rule of law when they don't feel that they get something back. And this is happening too much in the countries, and that's what we have to address. And then you are right, we need the right statesmen and politicians to address that and to work with that on a democratic way. But that is something we have all to do all together.
Mr. Nissinen, what do you think about the EU's
Well,
tools?
if you look at the actual lawmaking of the EU, one you can roughly generalizing say that implementation is always a problem in the EU, no matter what kind of legislation you look at. And so maybe we could also conclude that with regards to this overall rule of law, maybe the EU is simply lacking implementation, and that's because of political will. And it's not always so easy for the EU itself either to follow the rule of law. The environmental community, currently for years we have been working on a case related to the United Nations Aarhus Convention, which is a UN convention that regulates non-governmental actors' access to environmental information and environmental justice. In this Aarhus Convention, the EU itself has been found in violation of the Aarhus Convention for not providing access to the Court of Justice of the EU members of the public. So usually when a country is found in violation of the provisions of the Aarhus Convention, that particular country usually mends its legislation quite quickly. But in this case, instead of correcting its action, the EU actually started, or more specifically, the EU Commission started questioning and fighting back the findings of the UN Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee. So to make a long story short, the Commission has been asked by the Ministerial Council, by the Member States, to explore ways to comply with the findings of the Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee. And of course, we hope that this debacle can be brought to a good end, and the EU will mend its legislation in the future. But this just shows that it's both the implementation and the actual obedience to the rule of law that is also sometimes missing on the EU level itself.
Interesting example. Ms. Heider mentioned populism, and we have populist anti-establishment leaders winning elections. What many of them are saying is that I will give your independence back, which is a bit like, one can say, anti-EU slogan. So are these people voting for such populist or such messages because there is no other way to make a difference? What should be done to reverse this course, to foster the feeling of participation in societies? And then talking about European values. Yes.
Can I just, I would like to challenge this because I don't know a European leader who has really won apart from the UK and Theresa May, who actually lost her majority in the election, who has been saying, we give your independence back. The others have used anti-EU sentiments, but none of them have won the elections on the promise of, we give your independence back. No, even Orban. Because if that was his electoral promise and that's what he was going to do, then we should have an application to leave the European Union on the table already now. But it hasn't happened, and I can't see it happening. So,
yes, please.
I think what what is actually happening, if we sort of come away from this lofty European level, sort of talking about some abstract EU, sort of when you sit in the member state, that's somewhere far away. Brussels, we don't know what they really do there, sort of who is actually deciding. There are these bureaucrats and all the rest of it. But when it really comes down to it, when we look at the promises, what then kind of these national or nationalist leaders or sovereignist leaders are promising, it boils down to actually to very practical issues. Mm-hmm. It boils down to the fact that the well-being, the social model that was built up in Europe, the whole safety net system that exists has been weakened but still exists in Europe. People felt that their personal security, and I do not mean by terrorism or military means or anything like that, but their personal security in terms of education for their children, their income, whether their job is there tomorrow, whether the housing is available, whether when they are sick they can go to the hospital, whether they will receive appropriate treatment, if they fall ill, whether there is the compensation that they can't work. These are very concrete things that affect people's everyday lives.
But what
and they have feel threatened because of the austerity policies that were enacted by many governments, that was actually unfortunately also promoted at the European level and prescribed to member states through the semester process or the economic governance process. People, the feeling of insecurity about their futures, about the future of their children, gave the ammunition to these sovereignist and nationalistic leaders to say that, oh, I'll give you this, or I'll sort of make it better for you. But what is also happening, and what we are seeing, is that they are not doing it. They get to power, but they are not doing it. They are not making life better for people.
Yes, but how can trade unions make life better for people? I mean, you mentioned very important, very concrete things. Is something that trade unions can do? You know, they represent.
Oh yes, and then we do. We have. If you take, I mean, there are obviously different levels. I'm working at the European level, but there are also national levels, and obviously every national trade union works directly with their governments, their regional governments, their employers at national level. But at European level, when we actually look at the mandate of the outgoing Commission and the work we have done with the Commission and the push that is behind there to have the pillar, do you really think that the pillar happened just because the politicians at European level decided that it would happen?
You mean a social
Do you need the social pillar? Yes, the European pillar of social rights. Do you actually know how many air miles, our General Secretary sort of was up in the air to go and convince all these different governments, including Orban, to subscribe to the European pillar of social rights, to actually agree that it was the Estonian presidency at the time, would sign, and on behalf of the council, would sign the European pillar of social rights. Do you know how many hours of different meetings, how many hours of lobby analysis, how many hours of work went into to have the revision of Posting of Workers Directive, to make the working conditions and the rights of posting of workers much stronger? Do you know how many hours work went into to have the work-life balance, to have the transparent and predictable working conditions? It didn't happen just because of some politicians. This was everyday work, many hours that we put in as trade unions to make it happen and to make it worthwhile for the workers.
Thank you. Mr. Nissinen, what would you say about participation? How to increase, or is that populism, is that the problem of isolation?
Well, I think there are probably better experts on populism in the audience than I am, but I just think that we just have to keep in mind that populism usually has national roots. Even if we look at populist movements all over Europe, we of course try to to find some common denominators and kind of try to see general trends, but after all, it's usually the populist politicians always they find national roots of discontentment and they work from that and so obviously the EU is kind of an easy goal and it's so that creates an easy enemy, but I think also national media they sometimes go with the flow and they just publish they don't tell about EU when the EU is making good decisions. They only tell about the EU when something strange happens or when the EU is incapable of solving something. So I think it's after all, if we could actually, as I said earlier, if we could actually put all the good EU legislation to work on a national level, then and also relate it to the decisions that are actually made in Brussels, then maybe little by little people would start understanding how the EU can also be of benefit to their welfare. I would actually say that many people in Finland probably understand this fairly well because we are a small open economy and so we have kind of had it quite clear to us why we are joining the European Union and we have also joined the European Union so late that we have had kind of a different kind of discussion about whether to join or not than those countries which already joined the European Union either to avoid the chaos of the Second World War or to escape from behind the iron curtain. So it's I just think that the EU needs to basically walk the talk, so to say, and implement its good environment-related and other legislation to improve people's lives, and that's of course it's a slow path and it takes a long time to go to people's hearts. I myself, I'm from time to time I'm extremely skeptical to the EU, even if I represent an organization which, generally speaking, has a very positive impression of the EU. But so I would just say that we have to look at what happens on the national level.
Well, actually, I mean, a lot of things that the EU decides on or decides in the EU level is not very often not very well implemented on the national level. So that's like, you know, to counter argue your arguments. And
but it's also true that when an EU directive is put to work on the national level, it as you know, it needs to be taken to the national law. An EU directive as such is not law yet, so it has to be implemented into national legislation, and that also opens room for different kinds of political maneuvers, and oftentimes, at least I know that in Finland, we try to oftentimes postpone the implementation of the EU laws to the far end of the possible schedules, so that things change as slowly as possible, and that's oftentimes when you talk about environmental legislation, for instance, that's oftentimes the demand of the Finnish industry that we mustn't take any dramatic, swift action, but we have to give the industry time to adjust to the new legislation, and so the whole chain of EU from EU decisions to the grassroots level gets kind of blurred, and it also opens the room for different kinds of political games.
Ms. Heider, do you agree that, you know, we should stick to the national level? Can EU do anything?
I really would like to say some words on populism and nationalism,
yes.
And what I miss here is the word trust. I think what we experience, and that's a little bit what you said when you say people are scared to lose what they have gained in the past, is that they don't trust their systems anymore to give them a reliable future. And that is also climate change, which is all over the people. It is about digitalization. It's about transformation of business models. It's about globalization. It's about having experienced the global financial crisis in 2008, which was, by the way, the starting point for a lot of nationalist and populist movements all over Europe, because that was the first time since 20, 30 years that whole societies experienced in Europe that the way could also go back and not only forward. And this is something. We have to talk about, how we can get trust back to the people. And this is again something. I'm for the business here on the panel. And what you see on the other side is also, which makes me quite optimistic, is you see Pulse of Europe arising. You see Fridays for Future on the streets. So you see young people with a new agenda. You see also new political movements coming up, talking about issues which are not brought up forward anymore by old parties. You see old parties declining. So there is a whole transformation in societies ongoing. And what I think is really we also have to consider about new ways. Next week, we as a company will conduct an event about climate change in Brussels. We will talk with Fridays for Future and politicians and other businesses. What can we do? It's time to act. What can we do now? Not asking always that something has to happen later and for business and industry it has to be smoothed down. No, there is an urgency. And what can we do? And what can we do together? When it comes to trade unions, what I often experience in Brussels as well as in Germany is that trade unions defend old working models. They want everything to rest like it is. But the world has changed. We need new rules for working times. We need new rules for flexibility. We need new agreements between workers and employers, how to adapt to the new competition level in the world. So there's a lot of things to do, and we have to change how we did that in the past. New people have to talk to each other, and then I'm sure that we can give the people back trust in the system, trust in democracy, and trust in future. And that is the best way to tackle with populism and nationalism, because they live from fear. They live that they scare people and give the people trust back, that they can trust in future, and you will get rid of that ghost of the past.
But what are the concrete measures? How is it? Is the question, is it competition? Do we need to? Do we foster participation in the society and trust by increasing competition? Competitiveness. Is that what the business is saying?
That's what I say. There is a lot of things to do. You have to try new formats. In October, we did an event on SMEs and digitalization. And we talked with the SME envoy of the Finnish presidency, for instance, in Brussels. We talked with SME Connect. And we are a global company. So normally you would not expect a global company talking and working or speaking or raising the voice for small and medium-sized enterprises. Because normally you would say we swallow them, because then we can grow. But that is not what we want to do. It's that we need our business, our economy needs small and medium-sized enterprises, and it's also an advantage for big enterprises that they exist. So let's do something together. That's what I mean. You have to create new momentum, new platforms, and new dialogue between people, organizations, and businesses, and political groups, and trade unions, and environmentalists to talk about things what they didn't do in the past. And that's what we all have to do together. And just that you can foster on the European level. We do that in Brussels. We have to do that also outside of the Brussels. It has to happen in the capitals of the European Union. And of course, all our politicians, especially the European politicians, which are far away from the regions, have to go out and speak to people. That's also not happening enough. We have all these nice institutions in Brussels: Committee of the Regions, European Social and Social and Economic Committee. They are all a lot of people. Yes, they have thousands of miles of climate-damaging flights behind them to meet in Brussels to talk really, really interesting things. There are interesting discussions and debates, but they never go back and talk to the people about it. That has to happen. Bring it back. Bring back discussions, what is happening in Brussels.
Mr. Nissinen, you wanted to first comment.
Yes, one concrete thing to add to what Maria Heider just said. You probably know that the European Union is running these Eurobarometer surveys. They are opinion polls about all the possible things that between heaven and earth, and how the EU citizens think of these issues. And one thing that comes that you can read in the Eurobarometer surveys every time and again, is that the European citizens expect strong action from their leaders on environmental issues, and they want to have European-wide environmental legislation. Even in the UK, where the getting rid of the European excessive European legislation was one of the slogans in the Brexit discussions. Even there, the opinion polls show that the UK citizens actually expect more and more overarching environmental legislation from the EU for the EU countries. And so this is one thing that the European leaders actually are misinterpreting. They don't see what the people would like to have to be able to feel this trust that Maria Heider said, and to really feel at home in Europe and feel that somebody is taking care of their interests and not only the interests of big capital or whatever, weapons industry or just to name a few. Car industry, for instance, yeah.
Miss Carr, please.
I mean, indeed, another thing that people want is more social Europe. Because Europe, when you talk to people, they perceive Europe as a sort of neoliberal something that pushes precisely for the interest of business and especially for big business. Not even for SMEs, but big business. When it comes to trade unions, yes, we always have, in not only trade unions, whatever field of life, we have people who are more conservative, who don't want to open up for new what is coming. Trade unions are not definitely not there to prevent progressive developments in societies, in the world of work. But at the same time, we cannot agree to the claims of platforms that the people who are actually earning them the money are not their workers, that they are all entrepreneurs, that they have no rights, they have no social security, no pensions, nothing. These people are the ones who are earning the money, who are putting in the working hours, so they should be treated. Okay, if you don't want to give them a legal status of a worker, fine. But give them the basic health insurance, social protection, the pension for the future. When they are sick, that they have sickness benefit, that they have safe working conditions, that they also have the separation between their working life and their private life. Because we know how these platforms are running. The people have to use their private phones. The company is not giving them the phones. They have to use their private phones, and they are under constant surveillance, under constant control. They have to be available. So people, what are we talking about? If this makes trade unions old-fashioned, I'm happy to be old-fashioned. But there has to be, in these new ways of conducting old business, because taking people from point A to point B is a very old transportation business. It's not sort of 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 years old, it's hundreds of years old. If we take the way goods are delivered to us, this is also very old business. It's just there are new ways of doing it, but when we use these new ways of doing it, we must not forget the people who are actually carrying it out.
Let's go back to the rule of law as a final question. We have discussing the rule of law mechanism at the moment to make EU funding conditional on the respect of the rule of law. And we have a European Court of Justice where you can have the decisions, can guide the countries in that way. Is that the rule of law mechanism that is under making at the moment? Is it an effective tool? And do you think there are other ways to strengthen the rule of law in the European countries? What would you say as a final round?
Perhaps I may start. To be honest, I have been busy with this condition into the annual framework and the budget of the European Union since a couple of years now, and I'm still not persuaded that this is the right way to do it. Because it seems so easy, but when you look into the ground, whom the money from the budget of the European Union is going through, it's going to a lot of social projects, for instance. It's co-financing a lot of democratic initiatives or civil society or projects done by the Ministry of Social Affairs in the countries, and you take that money away from those people who you want to teach about that European Union is social.
But the point is not to take money away, but then the country that is violating has to finance themselves.
Yeah, but that they can't. That's what they. And what will happen when you do that? It will tell the people it's the European Union is punishing you, and you increase their negative sentiment against the European Union. That is something I really fear that could happen with the money, because at the end of the day, it will even not happen that the countries will finance it itself. They will stop it, and they will stop a lot of those projects. And then you get exactly what you don't want. You get negative sentiment. So I don't think this is a way forward. I really believe that the European Union should fund more civil and democratic activities. They should do more on their own in their countries on that perspective. So they should have more ambassadors out there. They should support movements like the European Movement International in the countries like the Finnish European movement, and to really support them and to encourage them to go out and to do more with the people on democracy and on the European Union. I think this is of more value than to cut off the money.
Ms. Carr, what would you say?
Well, I agree and don't agree, in the sense that also in the trade union movement, we are a bit hesitant about conditionalities, especially when it comes to the European Social Fund and the cohesion funds. On the other hand, we are talking about the common pot of money that all member states have contributed into. So the member states should also kind of have a say how this money is spent. One way that could be thought of is that at the moment all these funds move through the central government. In order not to punish the people when the central government is not behaving in accordance with the rule of law or democratic values, is let's go directly to the regions. Of course, in the regions you can have exactly the same problems. You can have sovereignist, populist governments, but you go directly to the people. You are not punishing the people, but you are taking away certain means from the central government. So maybe that is one of the possibilities. But as I said, we are hesitant in the trade union movement. We are hesitant about how to use conditionalities, but very clearly there need to be mechanisms how to direct the common funds that we have and how to share them between the countries.
Such as? What could be those mechanisms other than conditionality?
I mean, very clearly we see that the threat of sort of, although it has never happened in Europe, taking away the vote in the council. It has never happened. It's there, the possibility is there, but it has never happened. So as I said, the one way is to look at how we can bypass the wrongdoers or kind of the politicians who are not really subscribing to the values, and try to go more directly to the people, so that they can still take the advantage of the money that is available for developing the common goods. But
Mr.
how to do that?
Yeah.
It's a $1 million question, I think.
Yes. If somebody wants to use fear as a political tool on a national level, then I I don't know how to best prevent it from being spread. Maybe I could turn this question back to Soili Semkina, because you are a representative of one of the Finnish mainstream newspapers, and so maybe you as a journalist can think of how the fourth state power, the free media, can prevent the fear from being spread. If national level politicians want to give wrong information about the EU, and if the media is not playing their role in counterbalancing this, either because they are too lazy, or they are too busy, or simply their possibilities have been shut down by those same politicians, then I don't know what is the easy way out of this situation. Maybe, I don't know if it would work. It was tried with Jörg Heider some years back, how it works to actually close out of the circle of the European political family these people, and kind of name and shame them, and see how they react. I don't know if this would work. Maybe on some level, yes, but it's on another thought, it kind of sounds a bit childish as well to kind of start closing people out of the room or something. But I don't know what would be the best way for the decision makers to actually feel the pressure, and not allow them to forward it further to the people, because if we start cutting funding from the Eastern European countries, for instance, who are already financially not so well off as we in the older EU member countries, then it's fairly easy to turn that also to something that evil that comes from the EU, and kind of glorify the national decision makers. So I think that's a question and a field of problemacy that the EU has not been able to respond to yet, and unfortunately I'm not any wiser than the common intelligence in the EU, so I cannot give answers to that either, but maybe we could ask the public.
Yes, well, we will definitely ask the public, but a bit later. Anyway, I will thank you, the panelists. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting debate. We will now just give applause, and then we'll have a next speaker. Now I would like to ask Mr. Brando Benifei to the stage. He's a member of the European Parliament and the Vice President of the European Movement Finland. And Mr. Benifei will talk more about the European values and the rule of law. Mr. Benifei, thank you. Here's the...
Thank you very much. Is this working? Yes. Thank you very much. I was supposed to speak for a preliminary keynote speech, but our flight, also colleague Pietikainen was on that flight, was a little delayed, so but I could listen to some of the panel, and I think that especially on the last topics that have been touched, my speech can relate and maybe give some further insight. It's a great pleasure, as I said, and an honor to be here today to address the European Movement International event here with the EM Finland on such an important topic, future of Europe, our rights and values. As a vice president of this organization, allow me to thank all the participants, friends and EMI members present today in the room. Thank also to our organizations, to the Secretary General, Petros and his excellent team in the Secretariat. I think we will have a whole afternoon of great debate. What does it mean, in my opinion, to fight today for the future of Europe? In which way the protection of our rights and values has become a matter of urgency, requiring us today to come up with new strategies, new solutions. I believe the central point, the knot of the matter, has to be found once again in the old but very vivid today question of sovereignty and its link to democracy. Sovereignty to be intended not only as the principle codified within our constitutions, but rather in its more recent, more political, dynamic determinations. simplistically, maybe, in my view, it does appear that a significant part of the debate around Europe today is more and more polarized around concepts of sovereignty. Pro-Europeans, and maybe those who think that we can build a stronger sovereignty being more united, against so-called sovranists. We call them in Italian the sovranisti, which I believe, in my opinion, is a new, maybe more cool way to just change the name of old-fashioned nationalists, or even worse in some cases, but more and more common cases, unfortunately. My point being that a Europe that is able to protect its rights and values can only, my point is that it can only be a Europe that is capable to take decisions. We have been spending decades rightly pondering about the democratic deficits that is still there of the European Union. It's a valid case, and it has sparked a lot of debate. But there is also a deficit of European government and European governance, whereby decisions taken are still, on many topics, too little and often a little too late too. The EU of today remains caught between two opposing pushes. One that is pushing it forward, another one that is pushing it backwards. There is clearly no single or simple answer to why this is happening. There are conflicting economic and geopolitical interests persisting among our EU member states. Also an institutional architecture that is probably unfit for progress. We discussed this many times in the EMI framework, and we will discuss that in the Future of Europe conference that will start next year. New challenges, in the meanwhile, from the outside world are advancing as rapidly as ever. I'm convinced that it's now necessary to relaunch a new idea of Europe, trying to rebuild a new concept of pro-Europeanism, as we are, as EMI, a pro-European organization, because the traditional pro-Europeanism is an orthodoxy that is failing today, because it's not connected, you discussed this also in the panel, to the challenges we are living today in many fronts, economic, social, labor, external action, etc., climate. So I think that the Founding Fathers' theoretical premises are still valid today, starting from the fundamental argument of the need to maintain peace on this continent by institutionalizing political conflict with common institutions. And reaffirming the principle of an ever closer union is crucial today. I'm convinced that this should be still our objective. But I think that today the debate in our organization is certainly enriched by different articulate positions, which makes our EMI environment very valuable and very rich, because we have a lot of possibility to put together different points of views, and this is fundamental. But we need to use, and we are doing it, we are trying to do it, we will do it even more concretely tomorrow also with the discussion at the board meeting, how to bring this richness into clear proposals for this needed change. Institutional action obviously is not sufficient. It's needed, but not sufficient. Much wider participation and a true dialogue with citizens and organized civil society is vital to overcome the lack of connection or the communication of what Europe is standing for, what it's doing. The Europe of every day that many citizens, you were talking about that earlier, simply don't know. And so we need probably a more practical, more pragmatic message on Europe that can reach out to citizens' needs and interests and show that we are already tackling them and we are ready to tackle them in a better and stronger way. The new EU legislature has just started with a lot of challenges. I will not delve into, for example, the foreign policy challenges that we will face. I'm chairing and co-chairing the working group of EMI on the foreign policy, and we will meet tomorrow to work on that also. But we have seen what happened in northeast Syria. We have seen the growing debate also in our European countries on the risk of of disturbances, interferences on our democratic processes coming from external countries, external powers, Russia, but not only that. And we have seen a growing disengagement, at least on some aspects, by US on some traditional cooperation areas with Europe. We have a changing scenario. We have a debate on that, on how can Europe exert its, we can say, strategic autonomy, as we usually use this term in the Eurocratic jargon. I think it's very, very urgent to find a way for Europe to exert this function, because we are living in a more and more complicated world where EU cannot only stay as an economic giant. It is already. It needs to become a bigger political actor. Migration remains a very open chapter of discussion. I will not delve into that, but I want to stress that also the von der Leyen opening remarks and commitments put migration at one of the central aspects for the work of the new Commission and new Parliament. And I think it's true, because what we discussed about the nationalists is also linked to the incapability of today still of the EU as a whole to manage, to work with the new migration flows coming from different directions. It's still an unsolved issue, regardless of the different positions. Obviously, also the economic slowdown of some, to change and conclude on these final economic and social aspects, the slowdown of some of our European member countries, of their economy, also strong economic models, has opened a debate on whether it's needed to start a change in our policies on the fiscal space, in the state budgets and resources, for example, for the Green New Deal. There is a lot of debate on how much there needs to be space for the national budgets and the European budget in a combination to support this green transition. I think all these things and many others will need to be discussed thoroughly with the Conference on the Future of Europe. I cannot hide that as Parliament we widely expect an important result from this conference, where the European Movement International will be able, it's not just an auspice, I'm certain that the EMI will play a role of a protagonist for supporting also the conference not to end in an impasse, because we have seen, you discussed it in the panel before, how many issues are an impasse for today, with a council that is unable to find majorities to advance the European agenda, often frustrating the parliament, which is approving laws and then they stay at the council level. There has been a fundamental change in the political understanding. In the past, every government, right, left, whatever, they worked for building successive compromises to advance the European agenda. Today, we see some governments that simply don't want their European agenda to advance. And they just want to get as much as they can. You discussed about the conditionality issue. And leave everything as it is and don't take responsibility. This cannot work anymore. This is not a possible future for Europe. Citizens will never support a European Union that continues working, or better, not working like this. In these 10 years, we have seen this change, also linked to a change scenario, as I said, new economic situation, also the economic crisis, and some movements going on. We heard about the European Pillar of Social Rights earlier, on which I have to say thanks as a committed MEP on the topic to the EMI for working on the Stand Up for the European Social Pillar coalition built with economic social enterprises, businesses, trade unions, etc. I think we need to make that pillar more constitutionally working at the European level in the framework, because I think that still the answers on the social problems are a crucial part to answer people's fears and people's uncertainty about their future. People sense of not having sovereignty on the future. And I want to conclude again on what I opened my speech with, the issue of sovereignty. On all these topics, we need to see and work together, and we need civil society, as EMI is a fundamental platform for that, to bring together civil society with politicians to find answers to this sensation of not having sovereignty on the future by citizens. And an answer obviously is partially based on policies at national and local level, but also based on a more functioning, more effective, more flexible in some parts, and more united European Union that is able, maybe with different formats, we will discuss that more and more, and it will be still a discussion if we need to reorganize, as I said, also our institutional framework. But what I think can unite to all of us is the conviction that we need to give people the message that we can be still sovereign in our future. We don't need to be sovereignist and nationalist to be like that, to feel that we can have control, a democratic control of what is happening around us, our society. They must not be victims of fear, of uncertainty in a way that makes people think that only without a democracy, with authoritarianism, there is a solution. No, it's not true. Our democracy can reinvent itself, remodel itself, and still be the way to solve people's problems and to advance our common European project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Benifei, for an interesting speech and interesting thoughts. Now it's time for a break and for coffee and refreshments over here. We will continue at 5:30, and well, enjoy your break. Ladies and gentlemen, is the microphone working? All right. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your refreshments and coffee. Now it's the second part, and we talk about the presidencies. As we know, each country gets its 6 months in the limelight of the EU when acting as a president. This autumn it was the Finland's turn to steer the wheel, and from the beginning of next year with Croatia. Presidencies are important, not only because you get to be under the watchful eye of the Brussels correspondent, but also because you get to set the EU agenda and to shape the future of the European Union, at least for your part. We will hear today both representatives from each country and to talk about their goals and their legacy. And after that, we will have some time for questions. First, we will have I would like to ask Ms. Tytti Tuppurainen on the stage. She's the Minister for European Affairs in Finland. She's one of the main protagonists of this Finnish phase of the EU affairs. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I'm truly honored to speak here today to such a audience on a topic which is very close to my heart. Actually, ever since I went to Germany in 1996, I was a young Erasmus exchange student. I've had Europe in my heart. Traveling and studying in a country that had just recently been divided and ravaged by 2 world wars really made me feel that we must do whatever we can to stop such events from happening again. 2 days from now, on Saturday, we will celebrate the fall of the Berlin Wall. What symbolically ended the period of division in Europe happened just 30 years ago. John F. Kennedy held a famous speech in Berlin about 2 years after its construction, when he proclaimed that he too was a citizen of Berlin. What Kennedy meant was that Berlin had become a symbol for freedom, a symbol of peace, and a symbol of standing against oppression. In this time and age, when new walls are being built and the liberal, rule-based world order is under challenge, we ought to remember his words and the spirit of Berlin. Dear friends, Finland has had the honor of holding the rotating presidency of the European Union during the latter part of this year. 2/3 are now done, and we have about 2 months to go. The rotating presidency is an ingenious invention that has been in practice ever since 1958. Why ingenious? Isn't it a waste of time and effort that every 6 months a new country takes the helm? Surely a permanent presidency would be better able to provide continuity. What can be achieved in merely 6 months? On the contrary, I believe the rotating presidency is an important and integral part of making meaningful policy in the EU. It shows that responsibility and power can be shared, no matter the size of the member state. And it shows that the EU is not only something that happens in Brussels, but also in Helsinki, Zagreb, and Berlin. I don't think we have in many years debated and followed EU policy as much as and as closely as the 2 last years in preparation for our presidency. The presidency program was prepared by all parties in the parliament, not just the government. Civil society, such as the European movement, who are hosting this important seminar, media and citizens from all over Finland have been participated in the discussion. I would say that if I have one wish as the legacy of our presidency, it would be that we continue to debate European policy after the presidency in the same involved manner as we have done before it. Dear friends, I wish to highlight a few topics that have kept this presidency occupied, and afterwards I will draw some conclusions on the future of Europe as it looks now during our Finnish presidency. The Greek philosopher Heracleitos once noted that no man can step in the same river twice. This also holds true for the Finland and our third EU presidency. Our presidency has taken place in an institutional junction. Not just one, but 3 of our core institutions are now or have been in the midst of change. The new Commission, we hope, will take office as soon as possible. The new Parliament, with over 60% of new MEPs, has begun in a bold manner. And a new President, Charles Michel of Belgium, will take over from Donald Tusk in the European Council in December. This has meant 2 things for the Finnish presidency. First of all, it has somewhat paradoxically been the rotating presidency that has had to provide continuity in the EU decision-making. And second, because the term is just starting, there hasn't been too much legislative files on the agenda. This has made it possible for us to focus on the EU initiatives that we think are the most vital for the next 5 years. In EU speak, we have had the task of implementing the EU strategic agenda into the Council's work. Dear friends, in practice, this has meant 4 things. First, ensuring our common values and the rule of law stay protected. Second, helping EU become a global climate leader. Third, developing our competitiveness and social inclusiveness. And fourth, enhancing the comprehensive security of our citizens. And there's a reason why we have put the rule of law as the first item on the list. It tells you that the rule of law and other common European values that are enshrined in Article 2 of our treaty, they are fundamental importance to our union. Without respect to the rule of law, there is no basis for environmental or no basis for economical sustainability. There is another reason too. Given the fundamental role of the rule of law for the EU, we feel that it's not always received the attention it deserves. It is not always easy to discuss these things, but it is a discussion that we must have. The presidency, which is responsible for the agenda of the Council, must ensure that the rule of law issues are taken forward. I also call on the upcoming Croatian presidency to remain strong on the rule of law matters. Having quite recently completed the rigorous process of accession to the European Union, I have no doubt that you expect everyone else to uphold the same standards of the rule of law. It is not quite the end of our term in office, but I can already see now that the rule of law will remain one of the strongest legacies of the Finnish presidency. I would like to think that we have shown that discussing these matters does not lead to division, and that solving deficiencies in rule of law are fundamental to progress on other issues, such as common funding. There are no free rides when it comes to our basic values. Concretely, during Finland's presidency, we have further developed a so-called rule of law dialogue. What we want is an annual exercise taking input from the Commission's rule of law reports. the important thing is that this process concerns all the member states. Too often, the rule of law issues are portrayed as just an exercise to point fingers on one or two member states, but our aim is to turn this discussion into a positive issue. Furthermore, we have been working on a mechanism that would connect the European budget with infringements of the rule of law. Now let me take an example. If you can't ensure an independent judiciary in a member state, you cannot be sure that EU funds are being spent the way they are supposed to be spent. This is why we have insisted on a mechanism connecting the budget and the rule of law. I'm happy to say that this position is shared by a huge majority of the member states, and I'm sure it will be agreed together with the EU's 7 years budget. Dear friends, time is of course limited today, so I can only wish to highlight one other topic from our presidency's agenda, which I believe will have lasting consequences to the future. It is the concept of the economy of well-being. As the Council has concluded, the economy of the well-being is a policy orientation and governance approach which aims to put people and their well-being at the center of policy and decision-making. People's well-being is of course an end itself to many policies. However, the concept of the economy of well-being underlines the mutually reinforcing nature of well-being and economic growth. The balance between economic growth and social progress lies at the heart of European integration. This is fundamental for a social market economy aiming at full employment and social progress, and it sets the Union apart globally. I'm proud to say that in October, the Council adopted conclusions on how to promote the economy of well-being. They include 27 different measures to be taken by the Member States or the Commission, which would promote a horizontal approach to well-being and welfare in the Union's policies. One of the most concrete agreements was to increase the role of social indicators in the EU's so-called semester, a tool that was originally conceived to watch member states' levels of debt, is increasingly becoming a way to ensure that mutually beneficial policies are implemented in all member states. Another concrete example of this is a joint meeting of finance ministers and ministers for education. A first of its kind, the meeting will take place tomorrow in Brussels. High-quality education, training and lifelong learning will provide solutions to the EU-wide challenges of sustainable economic growth, productivity and investment. We believe that a comprehensive approach to the economy of well-being is central to Europe's future. It is the European ways of doing things. I'm proud to say we managed to get the Council to agree that the EU needs a long-term growth strategy, which is aimed at ensuring that the Union becomes the world's most competitive, socially inclusive, climate-neutral economy. The Council decided this in October, and we are expecting the new Commission to come forward with the strategy soon. Dear friends, finally I would like to present you with some thoughts on where the Union is right now, as we are already preparing to rotate the leadership to our Croatian friends. I think everyone can clearly see that the forces and trajectories that shape EU's operating environment are not going anywhere. On the contrary, pressure to act is growing. First, the climate crisis demands leadership and someone to show a sustainable path forward. Second, economic growth is again slowing down and seems to remain sluggish for some time. And third, EU's global position and security situation is in a flux. In climate, the EU is the solution, as we have demonstrated capacity of emissions reductions in a socially sustainable way. To make economic growth pick up again, we need to invest in research and correct the dysfunctions of the internal market. And we must take an active global role in our neighborhood and in Africa, but also with our partners in trade. All of this will not come through business as usual. We will need to focus our minds and ask ourselves, will we make use of the tool that is the European Union, perfectly capable of solving these global problems that trespass national boundaries? Actually, Finland's former president, the late Mauno Koivisto, has already said all of this in 1992. Speaking to the College of Europe in Bruges, he said, I quote, "Meeting today's political, economic, environmental challenges calls increasingly for cooperation at a higher than national level. Commitment to national values must therefore not prevent us from sharing our sovereignty with other nations which have the same basic values." I could not agree more. The new institutional cycle should be seen as a possibility, not a threat. The new Commission has the chance to refocus energy and effort to the right places. And given the first few months, I'm sure the new Parliament is ready to cheer them on. While it is the member states who often have to bear most of the work in implementing the EU-level decisions, it is also the member states that will feel if the EU is not working. Cost of not acting is too high for even the staunchest skeptic to sit in sorrow. I wish our Croatian friends all the best in their efforts during next year. We share the responsibility of making the sustainable future our presidency programs call for. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Tuppurainen. In January, the most recent member of the European Union, Croatia, will start its presidency. We will now hear what Croatia intends to do. To tell us, we have Mr. Josip Buljevic, the ambassador of the Republic of Croatia and Finland. Mr. Buljevic, thank you.
Is it working? Yes. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Europeans. It's my pleasure to be here with you and share my views on the most important challenges and priorities for the EU in the new institutional cycle, as well as Croatian presidency priorities. Preparation to our presidency began through the joint work of the trio members, Romania and Finland and Croatia. A joint trio program should be realized as much as it will be possible until the end of our presidency, when Germany will take the presidency with the new trio. It was a nice experience to cooperate with Romania and Finland in trio, and thanks to them, really thanks to them. Croatia, the youngest EU member state, and in 7 years of its membership, proudly assumes its Council presidency role. It is a very significant moment. It presents an organizational, logistical challenge, but also a unique opportunity for Croatia to show its capability to perform this task, to promote its goals for the benefit of all EU member states and their citizens, and to present itself politically, economically, and culturally. It's important to stress that there are two important aspects of the presidency. The first one is about the managing regular work of the Council at all levels in Brussels, where we will chair around 1,000 meetings. Our permanent representation in Brussels is preparing intensively, and the chairs and co-chairs of the working groups are already in Brussels and getting ready to assume their role. The second one is that we shall organize a number of meetings and other events on different levels in Croatia. Around 161, mostly in Zagreb. Of the most important ones are the EU Western Balkan Summit in May 2020 in Zagreb, and 12 informal ministerial council, and 8 of them will be in Zagreb. This is all happening at the moment when EU is faced with numerous internal and external challenges. terrorism, cybersecurity threats, migration, conflicts in our neighborhood, proliferation of misinformation, rise of populism, etc., etc. The whole world is going through a period of uncertainty, while multilateralism, as we know, it does not exist anymore. The situation in the EU, as well as in the world, is getting more and more complex. Therefore, we, EU, has to act and adapt. We have to strengthen resilience to those challenges, and the best way to succeed is by working together. Togetherness and unity are our best and most valuable strengths. January of the next year is just around the corner, and the question of Brexit is becoming more and more difficult. UK withdrawals without a deal would be bad for both EU and for the UK. We have to face this challenge and staying united as we so far. In this complex environment, and in only 2 months' time, Croatia will assume its first presidency of the Council of EU. This role is especially dear to us, not only because it means leading the Council work, but most importantly, because it also represents the success of Croatia's European path. From the country that suffered the war and aggression no long time ago, we managed to recover, reform and develop to the point that we will take leadership of EU Council. This is make us particularly proud, as it shows Croatia's ability to deal with the different challenges and numerous tasks. An extremely important message to the rest of Balkan region and the country who is candidate for EU membership. A significant number of the elements presented by Ursula von der Leyen in the EU political guidelines will be high in our agenda as well. In our activity as a presidency, we will focus on those areas where we feel the EU can deliver the most by promoting joint and inclusive initiatives beneficial to all member states, fostering a sense of unity, consensus and convergence. We shall strive to give further impetus to the proposals and initiatives contributing to uniform and sustainable economic growth, rising and convergence, and strengthening the competitiveness of the Union, promoting connectivity and enhancing security of its citizens. We will also continue to advocate the active role of the EU at the global scene in its neighborhood, especially our closest one. There will be 4 pragmatic overarching priorities we will focus on during our presidency. First one is Europe that grows and develops, where we will promote uniform, sustainable and inclusive growth of the EU and try to address the pressing issue of demographic challenges the EU is facing. We will advocate for the strong single market, for raising the competitiveness of the EU through cohesion and convergence, whilst taking into account the sustainability of growth and tackling of the ever-pressing climate change issue. Second one is Europe that connects, where we will promote initiatives contributing to transport, energy and digital connectivity by also addressing the challenges new technologies and digitalization are posing to our societies. Third one is Europe that protects its citizens. By strengthening their security, both internal and external, we will work on a comprehensive approach to migration and all challenges in the regard, especially those related to illegal migration. Fourth one is Europe that is open and assertive in its immediate neighborhood and globally, or influential Europe. On that note, we have planned to host 2 major political events, one in Zagreb in May 2020, the Western Balkans Summit about enlargement, and as well as the Eastern Partnership Summit, it's not sure in Zagreb or in Brussels. Being conscious of the transformative power of the accession process, we will continue actively supporting EU enlargement based on the fulfillment of all well-established conditions and criteria. Croatian presidency will be devoted especially to enlargement, and I would like to take this opportunity to send them a message that Croatia strongly supports all Western Balkan countries on their European path, and that as presidency we will be an honest and ambitious broker objectively evaluating their achievements and expectations with the enlargement, conditionality and reality. For all our ambitions and plans, we need to have sound European finance, so we hope to have a high-quality agreement on the multi-annual financial framework as soon as possible. We are fully aware of all challenges in that process and stand ready as a future presidency to contribute to the reaching a balanced deal that is acceptable to all, that reflects well EU policy, priorities and citizens' expectations. We will attribute special attention to the process related to the better functioning of the Schengen area and the Eurozone, that we see crucial for the EU as a whole. We will have to deal with the consequences of Brexit depending on what will happen in January. Most probably, we will be in the process of preparing a framework for the future relations between the EU and the United Kingdom. Building on the results of our Finnish friends, we will undertake necessary efforts to work on all other dossiers on the Council's agenda, thus ensuring the undisturbed beginning of the new legislative cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, being for the first time at the helm of the EU, we will be an opportunity for Croatia to jointly with our partners shape, to quote my Prime Minister, a more agile, coherent and outward-looking European Union, fit to proactively tackle all the challenges ahead. Finally, let me conclude by saying that Croatia believes in strong EU, an EU that puts its citizens in the center of its action, their well-being, their quality of life, their safety, their future. An EU that is based on equality, on mutual respect, and understanding, on constructive compromise, on ambition to prosper evenly, on high values, on freedom, the EU that is strong for all of us. With that in mind, we will take the presidency role. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Buljevic. I would like to ask Mr. Tuppurainen also on the stage. Please, if you could sit. We now have questions, time for some questions, but before I let anyone else ask, I'd like to ask myself. Please, sit. Well, first, I'd like, Finland is still is a president. Finland has set its very ambitious goals for its presidency, get a deal on the EU budget, have all countries committed to the climate neutrality by 2050, to make a rule of law mechanism. So far, it doesn't look so good. Are you satisfied with Finland?
Maybe we should ask the audience as well. What do you think? Well, the MFF is, of course, a huge file that we've been working intensively with. But I must say, it wasn't one of our aims to get the deal done by the end of the year. It was actually the European Council, the leaders, who decided to try to strike the deal by the end of the year. And we have been trying to facilitate the negotiations as good as we can. But it doesn't depend only on us. This is not a solo performance, but it is a joint effort. And what we are doing is that we do finalize the so-called negotiation box that will make the basis for the budget agreement later on. So that is how far we can go, and then the rest depends on the President of the European Council and the Member States. So that's just one example that results, it's difficult to say, but our priorities, which I described in my speech, I think we've proceeded quite well.
So negotiation box, so you mean Finland is putting the numbers in the EU budget?
Exactly.
And then after that there are negotiations. Mr. Buljevic, you took presidency, enlargement is one of the priorities, yet it was blocked by one of the countries, for instance France. It was blocked last time, it was discussed on the European leaders' levels, and there's an argument that, do we need more enlargement? We can't even make decisions by our, between the EU 28 members, and whether we need more integration or enlargement. What do you say?
First of all, yes.
Yes.
First of all, enlargement is one of the high-level priority for Croatia and Croatian presidency, and for my country, it's very important to put enlargement very high on priority of EU. Why? Because it's a question of identity, it's a question of security, and it's a question of values. We spoke about values. From our point of view, Albania, and especially North Macedonia, fulfill criteria. We promised them something, and I think it's very important to keep promise and to realize their European path. I'm personally afraid, I have some experience in security issues, and I'm afraid that we will send wrong message if we will not keep open enlargement policy, especially in Southeast Europe. One of my priority here in Finland is to explain how important is to pay attention, especially in other part of Europe, for the Southeast Europe. Because what is Europe? Europe is very complex. And in our part of Europe, in Southeast Europe, we have indigenous Islamic community. It's very important to send them clear message. You are Europeans. We should decide, is Albania Europe, is Bosnia and Herzegovina Europe, is Serbia Europe, or Montenegro, or North Macedonia? If they are Europe, if they are fulfill criteria, we should treat them as Europeans.
So you are saying that, you know, by going to the EU, by opening the negotiations, you are defining what is Europe?
Yes, it helps to define what is Europe.
Audience, please, would you like to have any questions? Yes. Yes.
Hi, greetings to everyone. I'm Varda Tahiri from Kosovo, representing the Kosovo Civil Society Foundation. In this matter, I would want to ask a question to the ambassador. Do you have, because lately you just didn't mention Kosovo because in the region, so was that intentionally at the beginning?
Yes, it was, but I will explain later.
Okay, and I would want to hear what would be your advice for your colleagues, meaning the politicians in Kosovo, about the process of visa liberalization at this stage in the Council. Thank you.
When I spoke that I'm afraid that we as a EU send the wrong message to the region, firstly I thought about Kosovo, because we made extremely horrible mistake to the Kosovo. We promised to Kosovo visa liberalization if Kosovo fulfilled criteria, create border with Montenegro, etc., etc. And what is now? Now, if you are, for example, a student for Kosovo, it's harder for you to enter to EU countries than from the Egypt or from Middle East somewhere. I think it's completely wrong message. We should send message that Kosovo is Europe. Kosovo is deeply in Europe with deeply European tradition, and we should help to Kosovo to feel that Kosovo is close to Europe and on Euro-Atlantic path. That's my answer.
More questions, please? Yes, over there. Yes, there's one.
Hi, Laura Kolehmainen. And I'd like to ask about climate policy on the EU level. For the audience members who don't know it, I'm the founder of the biggest citizen climate campaign in Finland so far. We collected 60,000 names for the Finnish EU presidency to focus on climate action. And I have a question for both of you, actually. Where are we in the EU at the moment? Tytti, in your speech, I was worried because you didn't mention climate action as a stressing point, even though it is in our government program as the first priority of our EU presidency. And that's also what the Finnish citizens have wanted it to be, and the young citizens. I wanted to ask a specific question as well. How are the 2015 negotiations going, and are we going to touch on the 2030 targets at all? This week, Dagens Nyheter, a big magazine, a newspaper in Sweden, was asking why hasn't Finland hosted a climate summit on the EU level? Why hasn't Finland opened the 2030 discussion yet? Are we going to do that? And if not, what about Croatia? Are you going to then open that discussion? I know that the new commission lead has suggested that this target will be made more strict, but is the Council going to do something about it? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, and I did mention climate because it is one of our priorities during our presidency. I did focus on the economy of well-being and rule of law, but it doesn't mean that we somehow would neglect climate policy. Quite the contrary, we will do whatever we can in order to facilitate the negotiations, in order to reach the agreement on the EU long-term climate strategy in December Council. The EU needs to be climate neutral in 2050, and we are now working hard towards that goal, and I'm quite optimistic actually that we will reach the deal during our presidency. If not, I'm sure Croatia will continue, but now it's no reason to be skeptical about it. It means that we also have to translate into language of just transition, and we will also have to address the question in the multi-annual financial framework, and I'm sure there will be elements in order to help every member state to get on board. But yes, climate is a very important priority to us, and we are now also being very vocal with the new Commission working program, and the 2030 target is one of the issues that we are working on right now. So don't worry, it is absolutely a priority.
Mr. Buljevic.
I can assure you that Croatia will continue to put climate issues as a top priority. It's part of program of our trio, and definitely we will respect all the points of our joint program, and I'm pretty sure that Germany will continue in that. I'm joking from time to time that we as Croatia as a Mediterranean are between two extremely efficient countries, Finland and Germany. But you could be sure on the climate issue we will do as much as possible.
Yes, please, any questions over here? Yes.
I am Maja Mančevska. I'm coming from Northern Macedonia as a representative of the European movement there. I would like to get back to the enlargement issue again. And first of all, I would like to tell you that I'm very thankful that you in Europe are aware of the damage you have done to our citizens by saying no, despite the promises that you gave to our people. And my question would be, especially to Croatia, do you have any advice how to persuade people to still believe in Europe, because the percentage of pro-Europeans is falling down and people are beginning to be disappointed in the European, not only values, but also the word they gave to us. Thank you.
Yes, I will. Yes, thank you for your question. What I can say, please, my advice could be in Croatia we had a very tough path to EU too, and we have some experience how hard is to explain to people that we should continue our job on European path. You should to explain people EU is not just economical question. It's not just financial question. It's a question of identity. It's a question of values. It's a question of future. North Macedonia and Kosovo and rest of the region is deeply inside Europe. You have very rich European history. Democracy was invented very close to North Macedonia, or maybe in North Macedonia. Exactly. And it's historical paradox that you are out of mainstream of Europe, and I think that we should feel Europe more emotionally and feel Europe as a part of our identity, and it's very important to keep your European ambition and your European identity as strong as and alive as possible. Thank you.
I do very much agree with Mr. Ambassador, and I must tell you that one of the biggest disappointments during our presidency was the failure to start the accession negotiations. For sure, I don't expect any miracles to happen during the last 2 months that we have. So for sure, it is the main source of frustration to myself. You have done great work in North Macedonia, also in Albania. People are expecting Europe also to act accordingly and to respond, especially the Prespa agreement, the fact that you actually changed the name of your country, that you were able to settle such long-term disputes. It should be rewarded by Europe, not because Western Balkans is European neighborhood, not because it is our sphere of interest, but because people, your peoples, they expect Europe to respond. You want to be part of Europe, and we should be able to also act accordingly. The Commission reports, they are clear, but we couldn't agree, and I'm very sorry for that. Also, personally, as the chair of the General Affairs Council, I can tell you that I did try all the possible tricks, also impossible tricks, but it didn't help. But it remains to be seen what happens during the Croatian presidency, and we will certainly support you in this effort.
More questions?
For that, especially that it did concern about the identity issue, because we even sacrificed our name.
Yes.
Thank you.
More question? Yes, there's a question over there.
Thank you. My name is Johannes Anttila. I'm from the think tank Demos Helsinki, based here in Helsinki. I have a question to the minister in regards to the economy of well-being. I thank you for Finland for bringing it up as one of the main themes of the presidency, and I think it was great, like you said, that not only bringing up this link between economic inputs and outputs and then well-being, but also as a thing in and of itself that's really important to Europe and is a crucial element in terms of legitimacy of the European Union at the eyes of the people. However, I would like to get back to money. I also like the conclusions that were made, but I have a question that do you see that the Growth and Stability Pact is somehow impeding these necessary investments into well-being that also would result in economic outputs per a great report by the OECD that came out a couple of months ago? And could there be some sort of exceptions made for these investments into well-being within the terms of the pact? Thank you.
Yes, Growth and Stability Pact. It is, of course, an element of the credibility of the fiscal discipline, and we have to keep it, that's for sure. Yet there has to be flexibility, there has to be enough room of maneuver for countries to exercise cyclic economic policies, just as Mr. Rinne government is exercising in Finland with our budget proposal for next year's. That is an example what kind of fiscal policies you should be able to do. So to answer your question is that we should better address the economic situation in the member states, but also at the European level. And I call on the member states to study the European semester, whether we could better utilize this existing instrument in order to coordinate our fiscal policies to meet better the economic cycle that we are probably entering this new recession. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but the growth is certainly continuing quite slow, and our economies should be able to respond.
More questions, please? It's okay. The journalist always has more questions. Well, Mr. Buljevic, you say in your speech that EU should be agile. Are you saying that EU too slow?
I'm diplomat, I cannot say. Definitely, I can see enough space to be more agile, especially on common foreign and security policy, especially in enlargement. We had recent examples about climate, about many. We should be more ambitious, I think.
But the member countries are actually blocking that being ambitious.
From time to time.
How about you? Do you agree? Are member countries blocking ambition?
Sometimes, sometimes. But you have to keep in mind that European Union is a democratic union, and we have to respect all the decisions done by the member states. So we cannot force member states. We just have to make compromise and patience is a virtue. You have to keep that in mind. That refers also to Brexit. I see the ambassador there also in the audience. So I must have to tell you, Ambassador, you said that you will solve the Brexit issue all the presidencies before you have also thought that the Brexit will happen during their presidencies also. We expected that, but we'll see. It remains to be seen. But nevertheless, EU has to be vigilant, we have to be dynamic, we have to be united, and we have to be strong. That is all the policy of the Antti Rinne government, and Finland wants to play its part. We want to be an active and vocal member state, and like I said, we will certainly work with you in trio and support your presidency. It will be a success.
I also wanted to ask Ms. Tuppurainen, is there anything particular that you would like Croatian presidency to continue from the Finnish presidency?
Well, like mentioned, I count on you to continue on the rule of law, because EU is just as strong as it is in rule of law. It is the fundament, it is the basics of our union. So if it weakens, our union weakens. And we simply cannot ignore if the common rules and common values and the rule of law is not respected in a member state or in a country that's part of our union. It's not a matter of a political opinion. It is a matter of a legal fact that is enshrined in our treaty. And we have to be very vigilant with this. So I really count on you to continue, and I must tell you it's not always easy, because there are also very vocal member states who do not want to take the effort they are required to.
Yes.
Definitely, we will continue on the matters of issues of rule of law, and we will do it on two levels. As a government, we will do it as a coordinator and EU presidency, and our non-governmental organizations, together with the Finnish NGOs, are preparing to take their part in rule of law issues, and we will be very, very active on that issues.
You also mentioned that Croatia wants to support their rules-based multilateral world order, and as part of supporting that, we need to get our own house together. So that's also one reason we have to be very, very active with the rule of law issues. Actually, I have one comparison. The famous American historian Robert Gagan has compared the rule of law and the world order based on rules to a garden. And if we do not take care of the garden, then it's the jungle that grows back. So let's not let the jungle grow back. Let's take care of our garden of the rule of law and our garden of the multilateral rules-based world order.
Thank you. Thank you for the for representatives of each national country. Thank you very much. Yes. Now we'll proceed to the third part of our seminar, which is the future of Europe. First, we will have Mr. Markus Penttinen, the Chief of International Affairs in Akava, which is a trade union confederation for professional and managerial staff in Finland. He will talk about the benefits of the EU in Finland. Mr. Jeven. Microphone. Yes, microphone, please. Yes, There you go.
Okay, are you ready, my dear European friends? It's a great pleasure to be here together with you and have a possibility of debating the European Union. I'm going to talk about costs and benefits of EU membership with the help of one concrete case. It is Finland. But before that, I would like to put forward one question to you. Do you know how many more jobs or fewer jobs in your home country you have due to EU membership? Or if you don't know the exact figure, do you even know one study in which this matter has been researched? Please raise your hands. Okay, but this is my study. No. You are not allowed to raise your hands. Okay, this is a very typical situation. Very fundamental matter. What is the jobs impact of the European Union? And we are among the people who are experts and the people who really know the European Union. Nobody's raising his hand. Yeah, something is wrong. And we have a lot of information about the European Union, about its history, task, institutions, and so on. But when you take a closer look at this data, it's very difficult to find concrete facts, what is the impact of EU membership or the European Union. There's one exception, the reports of the European Parliament, the cost of non-Europe reports. They are the only systematic review of EU's impact, but they are at the general EU level, not at the country-specific level. And it is highly ironic that the only exception, together with this general level European Parliament report, is now the United Kingdom, which is leaving the European Union. So you have to start the process of leaving the European Union if you want to know the answer to this kind of question. What is the impact of jobs, economy, and so on? Amazing, but that is the fact for the moment. And all this may partly explain why national debates about the EU are often dominated by one limited aspect of the membership: national contribution to the EU budget. Are we a net payer? Are we a net recipient country? And everybody is debating about that, but not about this overall impact. And in Finland, we had the same situation. Already 25 years as an EU member state, but no up-to-date assessment of its effects. And this is the background why Akava, my employer, commissioned Oxford Economics to provide an independent review of these economic impacts. And the study is here, and I will explain you some main result of the study. Roughly speaking, the results of this study are obvious, but with one major exception. Firstly, about those economic benefits. Finland's EU membership has lifted GDP per capita between 1.2 and 1.7%. Increase in average household income is more than 1,000 euro every year. You can see the figures there. Membership has generated more than 40,000 extra jobs in our country. It's a huge number in a small country like Finland. And one consequence is also more trade and investments. And in addition, this is an important conclusion as well. According to the study of Oxford Economics, the benefits will by and by grow. There will be new trade pacts, digital market, energy union, and so on and so on. Nevertheless, in every presentation, like in my presentation, there's the famous but. And this famous but is the economic and monetary union. The study of Oxford Economics indicated a mixed set of results for the EMU, more or less a neutral impact, not positive or negative. And then about the cost of EU membership. There are two main areas, according to this study. I already mentioned the contribution to the EU budget. It is a fact, and Finland is a net payer country. It's a second fact. However, this fiscal cost of membership is small compared with overall economic benefits. For instance, last year, the cost per capita for an average Finn was around 100 euros. Compare this 100 euros with the figures that you have just seen. Very small, 100 euro, it's almost nothing. The second area is EU's so-called regulatory costs. However, according to this study, they are not the major issue because Finland, like all the other member states, would need to implement own regulations also outside the EU. Inside or outside rules are needed. Then let me conclude my presentation. The EU has a number of different dimensions. We have political, environmental, fostering innovations, values, and so on. And this study concentrated on economic aspects. Results, implications were overwhelmingly crystal clear. From the economic perspective, beyond any doubt, our EU membership has been a very profitable business, and those benefits are continuously growing. And my second concluding message is that it is high time to elaborate these kind of impact assessments of the EU in every member state, everywhere, and in every field. And finally, like in the matter of climate change, let the facts and research talk, and in that way combat the nonsenses of populism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penttinen. Now we have a next panel, and I'd like to ask panelists to sit over here, please. Would you come? In this third session, we will talk about European democracy, a big topic, but mainly from the European Parliament's perspective. I would like to introduce you first. Here we have Mr. Ville Niinistö, the member of the European Parliament, the Greens, Mr. Jouni Ovaska, the Finnish parliamentarian and president of the European Movement, Finland, Sirpa Pietikäinen, the member of the European Parliament, social, central left, right, sorry. No, sorry.
Close.
The EPP, that is definitely close. And Mr. Brando Benifei, the member of the European Parliament, Social Democrats. Well, as we have witnessed in the last European elections, the turnout rose considerably. Yet, I mean, a little less than half of European populations didn't vote, and in Finland it's even more that people that didn't vote. And yet there are a lot of benefits to the EU, as we saw. So I would like to challenge the parliamentarians first. What are you doing wrong? Mr. Niinistö, please.
Well, I mean, to start with, I think it's a kind of like a weird way of discussing European Parliament, as it's kind of like a different universe somewhere else, because like the national parliament, we can disagree with its decisions, but we don't leave the Finnish state just because we disagree with some of the majority decisions in the Finnish parliament. So European Parliament's discussions and values and differences between parties have to be made clear also to the population that this is our internal decision making. It's not something that comes from Brussels. It is something we all do together. And this is maybe, this link is weak, as you well know also that the media focus on Brussels is weaker in all member states than in national politics. But I would like to still say that having been in the Finnish parliament for 12 years and now starting in the European Parliament, also being in the council as a minister, I feel there is a lot more dynamism, positive feeling about the future, feeling actually within the new Commission's founding as well, that we will tackle the challenges we have ahead in climate and social justice. So I think the European institutions are actually a lot stronger than it looks from here. So maybe the weakness is in member states and not in Brussels.
Jouni Ovaska, would you say for the member states, is the weakness here?
The first thing is, of course, that the number of the young voters was rising in Finland too, and that's one of the good things from May. But how to make people to get to know the European Union is like Ville said, that we need to be more informal. Also, like we have to see news from Brussels, what's going on, and I think young people are more active with the news from EU level, and we know that there are many things happening also in our parliament what comes from the European level. And that's one thing that we should be more active. But we need also our parties here in Finland to be more active. We are concentrating only the Finnish policy, that we should do something with the EU level.
Miss Pietikäinen.
Well, first of all, I really need to agree with Ville Niinistö that European Parliament is much bolder and much stronger and much more united and future-focused than national parliaments. But still, yes, we do wrong, and I think that I can at least figure out four or five things. First, we are not bold enough, and we are not brave enough. And let's pick up the examples like circular economy, like climate change, like the social dimension, what we've been talking here. When you have to confront the member states, for example, in trialogues, it's the question, do you really sort of put adequate tough against the tough? Do you really use this kind of a public sphere on debating and sort of pointing the finger, not only in these kind of panels, but look, what is the problem? What is the issue? It's the German car industry. It is the Polish coal. It is the Netherlands and agriculture. And yes, we Finns have the peat and part of the forest policies. So everybody is sort of
and fiscal discipline.
Running behind this kind of a national thing. And the bold against lobbying too. And this relates to the fact of national lobbying. Whoever in the companies sort of take the flag as the Iron Man's cave and say, look, this is the national interest, this is the European interest, can sort of gain the floor. And that is sort of one of the power balance. And last but not least, not to continue all of the list, is that we do not have the capabilities and maybe not the capacities to address the people directly as well as we should. At least I'm struggling with that all of the time.
Mr. Benifei.
I think I can adhere to many of the things we heard, but I want to also underline that the EU as it is today, it's very difficult for people to understand. So they can figure it as they want from a prejudicial point of view, positively or negatively, but only a few really understand it. Because today, think of the names. We have the Council of Europe, which is not European Union. Then we have Council of the European Union. Then we have the European Council. They are all different things. This is the symbol of the too heavy, decades-long superposition of a long compromise that is this union. That has delivered a lot with the internal market building, the peace, the fundamental rights net that we have built, a defense net, investment policies also, especially in the last years we started doing that. Okay, but it's not enough, and people don't really understand. They don't really understand because when they hear Europe from the media, they don't know if it's council, if it's parliament. They get a general, I would say, very confused message that is based also on the fact that the EU itself is confused, is complicated, it's too messy. Too many things are being discussed, and when you look at the just last point on the external dimension, the EU has like a lot of different poles of power that express the European Union's position with the outside, and everyone is confused. I was discussing this with some US interlocutors a few days ago. We have a European Council, we have European Commission, we have the Parliament, we have the member states. It's too complicated. I think that we can, it's not populist to say that we can simplify a bit, and simplifying means being more effective also.
Ms. Pietikäinen, is the European Union a communication problem?
Well, partly, and of course this is true too, that it is complicated, but come on, I think that this is this kind of an urban myth. Half of the people on a national level don't know which parties are in the government. And if you would ask them, how do the committee institution work in the national parliament or how to follow the law bill, how it is dealt there. I bet 80% of people couldn't sort of describe it. Plus then, raise your hands. What is your communities, your municipalities' budget? When did you have the last time your council meeting? What were then on the agenda? And we do not say, oh, this is so complicated, I can't understand it. And I think that we should be sort of breaking this myth too. Yes. It's pretty simple to find a bit of a differences between me and Ville Niinistö and Teuvo Hakkarainen. And I don't know if it is only our fault if you can't figure anything that sort of makes us apart.
Mr. Ovaska.
Yeah, we have to. I think that people, they don't know if they don't want to know what's the difference between council or commission or parliament. At least the most important thing is how to act. If they want to act at the EU level, they want to do something. It's same here if they want to act to parliament and to local municipality councils or everything. It's the same at the EU level. Just people that they have a feeling that I'm part of this union and I'm a member as of this level. I think that's the most important thing.
Mr. Niinistö.
I don't think there's ever been a body of government, whether it's local or national or European level government, that would have increased a lot of popularity and created trust for it by speaking about organizational charts. If you have one, tell me about it, but I don't think there is any. So the whole discussion that EU's democracy and decision making is complex. Yes, it is, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It's complex in every level. What we have to change is the results. We have to make better policies and show that we can deliver. And that's the discussion we should have. And having been in the European Parliament, I think actually, I mean, a long experience in the national parliament and a background as a social scientist, I love the idea of parliaments having the control over governments and trying to be a broader representative of the people's will and have a real value discussion between different ideologies within a community. And I think European Parliament does all of that better than, for example, the national Finnish Parliament. When I look from Europe, what happens here, I mean, it's just fighting about stuff that who said what and do I like him and or her, and then the topics are totally of the discussion, the actual how we want Finland to go forward. It's about whether you like the True Finns party or not, and do I get to say this or not, and he's stupid or not. I mean, the level is so low that this kind of paralysis of decision making in all European democracies is what affects Europe as a whole as well. And Brussels is affected by that member states don't know where they want to develop as democracies and as countries. And that's the thing we have to find in ourselves. And European Parliament is a place where no government controls us. Macron was trying to do that because he was ringing around and saying that you have to vote for Goulard because, you know, I'm a tough guy and a leader of a big country. We didn't care for it because we look at the content of the issue and we thought that she has issues that are similar as some Commission candidates from Eastern Europe, and we thought that the French should be at the same level, scrutinized at the same level as Hungarian and Romanian ones. And we didn't care for what Macron said. And I think that's strength. And national parliaments don't have that kind of strength towards state governments. They do what the governments want.
Well, talking about paralysis, this is what's happening on the EU level at the moment, because, you know, we don't have a commission. The commission was supposed to start from the beginning of November, and it didn't start because, you know, some of those commissioners were blocked, and there was nothing, and then they didn't choose new ones, and we're still here. So, you know, and there's clashes between the institutions. I mean, how do you explain this to the citizens? I mean, is the future of Europe in good hands? You know, how do you
I think so.
Sure, maybe yes.
Shortly.
Yes.
Yes. No, if I can just say that I totally disagree with my colleagues, because I think that, completely, because I think there is too much of an underestimation of this problem of the organization, because it's linked to what you were saying. Maybe I was not too clear, it's my fault, but if you have a council that is today a diplomatic body that is only partially a real legislative body, but it's determined and governed as a diplomatic body, people will not understand that when we approve something in the parliament, why it's not working. Because there is a diplomatic body that is not the European Senate, like it would be a simplifying measure to have, like in national parliaments, in national member states, a lower chamber, a higher chamber, a kind of European government. It's not like that. The council, why it blocks everything? Because it has the diplomatic consensus way of doing. So even when they could decide in majority, they try to find consensus. And so they don't decide at all. Yes. So that's why I was saying there is also this organizational aspect, because obviously people don't care. But many people at least know what is the Chamber of Deputies, their Senate or whatever in their country, what the government is. There is easier transparency and accountability. The European Union as it is today, it's impossible to be really accountable, really democratic, really transparency, apart from people like us that are in a European bubble. We are a super minority of the European citizens.
But how do you change that? How do you make it better, If there's so much, how do you make it better?
I made already a few proposals, making the decision-making, the legislative part, for example, a real legislative method without exceptions and, as I said, the council is a diplomatic body.
So basically everything between the member states should be decided by majority and by majority, not consensus seeking.
First of all, and making it more, people know how the mayor and the council works, the regional, they have sometimes vague understanding, but there is at least a base of understanding of people. Today, the huge misunderstanding of how the EU works lets people say that Europe is doing this, is asking for that. You will never say Italy is doing that, is asking for that in the Italian newspaper. It will be the government, it will be the parliament, it will be... When we talk about Europe, it's always Europe, Brussels. What is that? It's not understandable. We understand it, but we are only too few that understand that. And we can make it more understandable also if we change it.
Mr. Niinistö, do you agree? How do you make it better?
Well, I think he has a very valid point. I wasn't actually disagreeing with the idea of developing the decision making, but it's only a vehicle to make better decisions. That's not the focus of European cooperation, that how we will organize the cooperation formally. The focus has to be to show that we can deliver. And there I think there is a lot of progress within after the European elections. It's clear that von der Leyen took into account the election results, that even though there is no, there is one half green commissioner from Lithuania, who's partly kind of like in our family, but otherwise she has taken the climate issues that were very, very vocally represented in the European elections, and we got a lot of more members of the parliament and others who spoke for these issues as well, did well, and the Commission has a very ambitious climate agenda if you compare to what you thought could be there a year before. And they have also want to push forward with the social issues, minimum wage issues and these kind of issues. So I think there is hope for Europe, that we actually show the citizens that Europe delivers. But the problems are, and you are correct in that, and what I was saying about that the problems are in the member states, and the problems are that do we have a vision of where we want to go together? And it's obvious that if we have populist parties in a number of member states, and we have kind of like member states often take a conservative national approach to a compromise, then it's hard to find the common ground where we actually are all together more than the sum of the parts. And that's what we have to reinvent.
3 points. Firstly, how to make it better. Yes, in principle, I agree about this Senate idea. That means the first and second chamber, and the decision made in qualified majority and in open transparency by the member states. We all know it's sort of a tricky thing because none of the competencies are moved from the member states to EU without unanimity, and I just can't envisage a unanimity about this kind of a changes right now, and not even in the near future. But still, it's good to keep on talking about it, because nowadays quite often when you are actually talking about the substances to be decided within the existing decision structure, so it's enlarging the integration. It is sort of labeled as federalism, and we do not actually talk so much about the decision making structure. Second point is that this national interest is something I'm getting itches nowadays when I've been hearing about it more than 11 years, because anything what you want, anything anyone wants, be it Orban or be it Macron or be it whoever in Finland, is sort of accepted as a good thing. And look, what is the national interest? It is the political decision of those parties that happen to be in the government. And then we have a big fight with the workers' rights or environment or economic stability. And then again, it comes as a national interest, even though if you would have a bit of a different kind of a political combination, you might have a different point. But then of your original question, are we in crisis? Well, Romania doesn't yet have the government. They struggle to nominate their candidate. By the way, national interest is that the member states can nominate their candidates. And by the way, Finland has had and do have very good commissioner. But I wouldn't cheer up so much about the Romanian, not the previous, nor the new candidate. That is not the brightest pen what you have in your bag, to be frank. And of course, we have the scrutiny.
She's decent, the new one. I mean, decent is good enough.
She's decent, this is true. But we have the scrutiny. I know it very well, and that's why I know her, because I'm working in the ENVI committee for quite some time and in some other places. Well, anyway, I think that we have...
I'm supporting an EPP candidate.
But we actually had better candidates in the list, but this is a side story. But I think that we should be frank about these things, because if this is more like this kind of a governance body, because let's be honest, it's not the government. Yes. It should be the competence, not only scrutiny or about decency that we have. And quite the vast majority of commissioners are good. They are better definitely than the last term, and the president is better. But then again, you always hide here again the behind the national interest. Then again, if we postpone the nomination of the commission with 1 month, doesn't really make a difference. We are keep on going working. Plus, last term, 5 years ago, it was postponed by several months, and it was the next year when we got there.
It's not better when it's longer. I mean, it doesn't.
But it's a lot faster than in Belgium.
Yes.
It's faster than the last time, and plus the scrutiny needs to take place, and it takes a bit of a time.
But how do you explain that to citizens? But Jouni,
I just try. Then the next steps are on you and for a couple of others. Sometimes you do not have the government either.
You still
within some weeks.
Yes, Jouni, please.
Yeah, the original question, in good hands, I hope, but the question is whose hands?
Yes.
As a representative of a small country, I hope it should be council, of course, because I hope the council has enough power to act at the European level. We need European Parliament too. Of course we need more and more. But still, our hope is in the council too.
You mean the European Council, the EU leaders. So basically we are here to the...
I knew it.
Well, would you think that Luxembourg, Malta, Finland, a couple of others would decide, okay, this is the way for us?
Yes.
Then when you have council, you all have asked the big ones to say where's the road.
Yes, but we have, this forever question about the deepening integration. Do you want to keep it on the European? Do you want the European level decide, or do you want the national? So the member countries, are really sticking to their own independence and sovereignty. So Jouni, Ovaska, please continue. I mean, do you consider that we should stick with ability for Finland, for instance, or other small country to block decisions which are important to Finland?
Yeah, in some cases, but I think it's also in our governmental program that we could make some changes of some subject to make them majority.
But don't you trust European democracy? Is that the thing? Because if a country wants to retain a possibility to block some decision, it means it doesn't rely on the democracy of majority.
I know the problem, but still, I'm thinking the level what we are deciding at that level, and on those decisions like internal markets and climate change, etc. I think we still have power to do those and get all countries with us. We have to trust about that. For example, climate change and Poland, we still have very good beliefs that we can make. In the end of our EU presidency, many good things at the EU level, at the council level too.
Do you agree?
I think Jouni is actually speaking against the long-term Finnish line, and one of the few good policies we've had in Finland when it comes to European Union and its development. That was the Lipponen policy in the late 90s, that we will want to be in the core of the Union and promote the common institutions, that is the Commission and also the Parliament, because smaller countries, we are never that strong in the Council, that if Council is the one that makes the big political fights, it's Germany and France who actually in the end make the decisions. And we can only veto, but that's paralyzing decision making as well. So it's not very modern and progressive. So I believe Lipponen was totally correct, and that's my feeling, having been both in the council and in the parliament, that the parliament still has to represent the elections and the discussions that have been in different member states in the elections. And there is a lot more kind of like progressivity in the parliament, because people are elected there to get things done. So I have a feeling that parliament, from all of the groups, it's actually quite progressive when it comes to the will to create policies that are good for Europe. There is obviously political differences, but we can create majorities, and we create them topic by topic. So it's actually a lot more expert-oriented analysis that the parliament has than I thought previously. And member states paralyze the decision-making if we don't go to majority decisions more and more, especially in climate. And I think Commission and Parliament can already use some of in the US system, there are some things that the President can do with executive power. There are actually more room to do that even within our current treaties in Europe, and I think the Commission should with the help of the Parliament, to try to use those, especially in climate issues. The form of target setting is member states' hands when it comes to 50% or 55%, but Commission can come with concrete proposal on energy efficiency or renewables that will increase in practice the target, and I think that's what they have to do if member states can't get their act together.
Mr. Benifei.
No, I just want to make you two examples, we can say very obvious, but I think very important to remember. It's been, in my case, also my experience in the electoral campaign, topics where voters were always looking at the answers on that, and still today, if I go to a bar in my city, I come from a small town in Italy, if we start talking about Europe, they will ask me about these two things apart from migration. The two things are fiscal policy, taxation especially, and the foreign policy. Because these are the two things where it's easy to hear, but where is Europe for that? Well, Europe is not doing anything for that. Because this is the kind of, simplified message. But it comes true from the fact that on fiscal policy, we still have this unanimity rule. So then we have Luxembourg, Malta, Ireland. I mentioned the three ones that are mostly in the center of the issue, that block any decision on taxes and things that our citizens ask us, because they don't want to be in a Eurozone where there are members of the Eurozone that do tax havens policies in some areas. And also, And this is very popularized. People know that. And foreign policy, we've seen what happened with Turkey and Syria, but also Syria before, or many other scenarios. Russia is always there, Iran is always there, US is always there. Where is Europe? People are asking about that. I don't know in Finland, but in a lot of European countries, I talk with a lot of colleagues, these two topics are very common topics on where is Europe. And they are exactly the two topics where there is unanimity today.
Mr. Ovaska, do you agree? Would we need more policies on taxation on the European level?
No. But
Why?
I was answering to Ville that I'm not changing the idea what Lipponen said, but I still believe that we need a strong council too. Otherwise, how could people trust the EU and European level, European Union, if they think that they're still believing and trusting their own parliaments and their governments, and they are making decisions there, and they don't maybe feel the parliament, European Parliament, so close. So that's why we need Commission, Parliament, and Council together.
Still building, why aren't we feeling the European Parliament in Finland?
Well, it is all this how much it is discussed and how much really we get the power and things done. But then again, how much should we do in Europe or national bodies or initial question? There's the nice word subsidiarity that describes it. And so quite often we think that the decision making is transferred from the national level to EU. And this is not true. Can Finland combat the tax havens by itself or any of the member states? No. If we do not have the competencies and if EU doesn't act, we do not act. Can member states, we have been watching it more than 5 years, tackle with the migration issues? No, it creates a mess. That's why we would need to decide it together. Could we, in financial crisis, solve the solvability or the capital requirements or supervision of a banking sector in member state level? No. No one can do it. It's like Hämeenlinna. We can't be responsible of defense or higher education or hospitals or university hospitals or anything like that. Either you do it together or no one does. And this sort of that we are small all together in Europe is something that we are missing in this kind of a globalized, concentrating world that we have more and more complex challenges like artificial intelligence, digitalization, climate change, people working different places, and we know the story. So I think that this is something we should definitely communicate better, and it's of course it's my and maybe someone else's fault. People don't sort of get this point, and then it is not alternative either. Okay, I want that the defense is decided locally in Hämeenlinna and the higher university education as well. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense in complex world with big challenges that we like to work, and this is going to concern Great Britain also, and in the future. It isn't that great if you just look the numbers and the scale and the influence. And this is the hard lesson for us to learn. We are half billion people, and in Asia, in the major area of Asia, there's more than half of the world's population, and definitely more than half of the GDP.
Yes. Yes.
So we are sort of a little Britons all here in Europe.
Quickly, you have last comments on this one?
Yeah, just to continue on that and more concretely, Sirpa is totally right that issues like single markets, I mean, most of our economic growth comes from what we decide as Europe together, and it's not something that countries separately can do. Brexit already as a process is very harmful to us as the European Union and to Great Britain, because we create internal uncertainty in these issues where we actually have had very good economic possibilities by having the strong single market. So these benefits, what Penttinen was saying, they have to be made visible. And the problem is that there's a lot of very interesting discussion at the European level going on in Green Deal. The climate issues has to be tackled together. I don't see that discussion nationally, because we are thinking at the European level now in the Parliament that what kind of industrial strategy Europe should take as a whole. Should we finance hydrogen innovation? Do we allow any more gas financing, or do we electrify the car market? It's huge things that we are discussing there. And actually in the national parliament, the climate discussion was more limited than now in Europe. So I find it's a bit sad that these huge things that we can decide together are so little noticed in national discussions. And one more thing I would like to say is monetary policy and financing. In Finland, we are budget hawks. We always been that because we pay our debts. We pay our debts, and war debts were paid, and that's an honest thing to do. And we haven't developed in our economic thinking from that. And at the European level, we don't think about budget discipline. The discussion is about green bonds. How can ECB actually, even Lagarde was saying, could ECB buy green bonds and be part of the climate financing? There's a big discussion as where the money is coming to invest in recreating a new kind of economy. And if we just think about we don't have money to anything, we don't have an economy, we don't have a sustainable climate neutral society. We are just going to fade out as an economy. So Finns should think larger in this sense as well.
We still have, the elections were in May. We still have many years to come. In your opinion, concrete proposals, what should be done in the next 5 years? Mr. Benifei, we could start.
I think that we need to tackle the situation of the EU in terms of economic growth and in lack of investment that we have compared to still today compared in many parts of Europe to the pre-crisis period, and also compared to what other parts of the world are doing in terms of public and private investment. Why? Because if we look, the general growth of EU is limited. Some countries are worse, some are better, some are slowing down a lot, like Germany. And there is the need to greenify this growth, as we're hearing about now. But also we need a growth that is not jobless and it is more redistributive. Or at least this is my political opinion. Distributing more of the income. I'm not talking about transfer union, which I don't dislike too much, but I'm talking of a more, I think, shareable idea of internal income redistribution, because in these years we have seen inequalities growing a lot, not just among, but especially inside the member states. So we have data on that. We can like it, not like it, ignore it, but there are data from our statistical institutes. So I think that if we don't build a stronger consumer base, more incomes for families, and to do that we need stronger growth, we need boosting the social dialogue. I was much agreeing with things coming from the last panel from the representative of the ETUC. We have new jobs where people are working poor, and it's not a little niche. It's millions of people that are working and unable to sustain a decent life. This is a scandal for our European social economy model. It becomes a lie for many people, especially for many young people. So I think that this must be our absolute priority, because on the basis of this we can build on a lot of other things.
Ms. Pietikäinen.
I think that we all can pretty clearly see the 5 big issues, and let's see, they are basically in the Commission's agenda to, let's see how bold they can be. Firstly, and that I would like to see much clearer there, is the science-based decision-making when it comes to bold, big societal challenges like the climate change. In economics, you do not sort of use different kind of a calculation method, even though the Greeks are trying to say in the history, okay, we'll manage the debt. They never sort of tried to say, no, we are on our budgets are on balance, we are not in debt. Because economics are taken as it's economic stupid, it's figures. And in climate change, we do not do that. And that's why we would need to have the science panel and the science-based this sort of a benchmark there. Are we doing adequate things? And I can tell no. And then the cost of non-action should be visible. Okay, quite many words about this, because I think that if we do not do adequate decisions in this sustainability, new Green Deal, circular economy, sustainable finance, measuring what we do, and the circular economy will fail and everything rest is small things. Then it is the social agenda, it is this ethical digitalization, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, it's better integration in capital markets union and internal markets, basically there we can find. And then, as Macron said today, that the NATO, did he use a word, is brain dead or something like that? We really would need to get serious about this defense and security politics and
so
dimension
European
of the
army.
EU. It's not actually an army, it's troops, but they should be commanded together when there's the fast action needs, and this seems to be the big tackle to really decide. And this is a bit like we, in Finland quite often we debate yes or no NATO. The NATO doesn't solve this. It's like, you know, when you have a local small-scale crisis, you don't try to catch the fly with the baseball bat, and the NATO is the baseball bat. You would need to have the adequate tools to act quickly, be it Syria, be it the refugees, be it the crisis in our near regions that we have been seeing all along.
Mr. Jonas, Ovaska.
A lot to do, I guess. They all need jobs. Green Deal, it's already said. Defense and security. And the one thing, of course, migration. We have to work for that the next years, of course. And then I hope we will still going on the discussion with the possible new members. So I hope, because that's the one thing we really need to do.
Mr. Niinistö.
I think Europe needs more discussion about big visions and big ideas, so I'll start with that because that leads to concrete decisions when we have some common approach on that. And I think these 5 years are actually keys. As a historian, I would like to look at the long term, and these years will be key in protecting and saving democracy, increasing people's belief in Europe that we can actually deliver within a democracy. And how do you do that? Well, we have a global system where the loopholes and faults of market economy are exploited by creating climate catastrophe, moving production somewhere where you don't have to pay taxes and you don't have to care about workers' rights and you don't have to care about environmental sustainability. And Europe is actually a lot stronger than we think. When China and US are fighting with each other in a trade war, we can actually create a sane majority in the world that will actually protect free trade deals and free market economy, but create just rules to that when it comes to social equality and rights, and create robust climate policies and environmental policies into that. And that's the job of the next 5 years. Actually, the Green Deal is about moving Europe to that future, socially just, where people feel more as part of Europe, that people feel that my future is going to be better than the past. That's what we have to create, that sense in Europe again. So it's about social justice and being a leader on climate policies, because that recreates the mission of Europe. We have something to do together.
Thank you. I'd like to ask questions. I'd like to ask if you have any questions in the audience. Yes, please. Over there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joonas Pulliainen and I come from the Student Union of the University of Helsinki. So it might not come as a surprise that I have a question about students and higher education. So I understood that the European Commission has proposed a doubling of funds allocated to the Erasmus program. How likely an outcome does this seem at the moment? Is it going to happen? Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah. I've been working a lot on this topic as a youth intergroup co-chair in the European Parliament. And I have to say that we managed to have a big campaign by many youth organizations, including probably some associated with the European umbrella ones from Finland, to even decuplicate the funds for Erasmus. This was a big request, 10 times. Then
Sorry, to duplicate, yes.
Decuplicate 10 times.
Okay.
The campaign was Erasmus per 10.
All right.
And in fact, a few governments of the council supported it. It was Belgium, Spain, Italy at the time. But then, a few years ago. But then, this per 10 has become the fact that the parliament has obtained as its own position a per 3. So the parliament has already voted. It's already our version of the text for the new Erasmus that we want 3 times. Okay, the Commission is true has proposed double, which was not really. The truth is, if you really calculate, it was 1.8. But anyway, it was sold as double. We propose triple from the parliament side, and there is a reason because. Okay, we need more young people access the traditional Erasmus because today there are still a little percentage, and also sometimes the funding is too limited. They especially if they go to the higher cost countries, they need families to pay a lot for them. Otherwise, the subsidy is not sufficient. This is an issue. But also we have a new form of Erasmus. I want to mention that because it comes from the Parliament. The European Parliament, unlike what often they are saying, has power on the budgets after the Treaty of Lisbon. And so we do a lot with our pilot projects and preparatory actions also for innovative ideas. And this was last term the Erasmus Pro. Is the Erasmus for young people that are not university students, that are apprentices, interns, and that can do a similar mobility scheme. We copied existing programs between member states and made them into a European scheme. A few years experimentation, the results were good, it was measured through the Commission, and so it now became a part of the new Erasmus. So it needs new Erasmus for young workers that are learning, still in learning, the traditional one, the Erasmus for high schools. There are a lot apart from the traditional old Erasmus. So we need adequate resources to pursue these programs.
The Parliament is very much pushing for tripling, but the new commissioners have already also spoken for it. There's a chance of getting that.
Yeah, the new commission is committed.
Yes, and actually you can't increase it too much at one time, so doubling, tripling, yes. But we should have the commitment for longer term, and I think that this tenfold is the right figure. Basically, I think that we should have compulsory internship, compulsory Erasmus that is paid for. And it is because of our professional skills are inter-European in the future. This is one reason. But the second reason is quite obviously the things that we've been discussing here today, so that people really get the feeling that the Europe is ours.
Any more questions from the audience? It's okay. I have more, plenty. Oh, all right. Yes, Raul, please. I'll give you my turn.
My name is Alex Pekkalin. I'm a vice president of the European Movement Finland. I would like to hear your views on enlargement and also on neighborhood policy. I mean, Eastern neighborhood policy.
Yes, Niinistö, please.
Well, I think there is a very strong majority within the European Parliament, which I'm also part of, that the enlargement should continue. And it was a big mistake by France to stop the continuation of discussions with North Macedonia and Albania, because Europe always has been strong when we have a mission of continuing forward with our values, and these countries have done a lot to progress in those issues. So we have to keep our word to them, and we don't want a similar process where we kept Turkey kind of like, that we don't know if we can go forward, and then we are more or less pushing them out. And that's what happened with Turkey, and Serbia is another issue. So these countries have actually done a lot. Macedonia has changed its names to go forward with this. So there's been a lot of compromises on this other side. So it should be pushed forward. And I think also European Union could do a lot more with the Eastern Partnership in general. And I think there are some things we could do also with Russia, personally, an area where I think we should speak about lifting the freezing of financing is environmental cooperation with Russia, because there's been a lot of good projects for example, for the Baltic Sea and environmental hazards in Russia, where European financing was key in addressing those, and some of that money was freezed as part of the sanctions. And I don't think environmental issues, which are altruistic issues, should be a part of that sphere, and that's a discussion that's ongoing, because that's of mutual benefit.
Mr. Ovaska.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mr. Tuppurainen. She's been so active with this enlargement, and we still hope that we can, like I said, that we can continue this discussion, and our government is pro-enlargement.
I would like to answer your question in two levels. And the more theoretical and broader and long-term is that if you look at the security and the crisis management and the European interest, I think that we shouldn't sort of start naming to any countries that, okay, you are not part of the Europe, you shouldn't be part of the Europe. So the broader, the better. But, and that means, of course, there needs to be the enlargement rules and conditions fulfilled. And that goes to Turkey, that goes to Ukraine and Copenhagen criteria. Plus then it is going to be a painful way after the enlargement, like we have seen with Visegrad countries. But I guess we knew that it's not going to be an easy ride. And this is sort of this kind of a thing that I think that we shouldn't sort of lose the scope when a thing is going bad in Turkey, for example, and Ukraine is pretty shaky. I wouldn't be not even close ready to take them in, neither of these two countries. But it shouldn't be sort of this kind of a hasty conclusion, never, never, ever. So keep the door open, let's see what happens. We support the democracy, the rule of law, and so on. And then when it comes to these acute questions, of course we should have done it, because the criteria is met, we have promised, it's a long negotiations, and I can't see any sort of a logical reason. It's not a money question, it is not a question that the internal balance would be thrown out after two small countries joining in 03, and it's total stupidity that hopefully we can sort of correct as soon as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Benifei, about EU enlargement.
I think we have, as was said at the beginning of this round, a large majority support in the parliament of the need to continue enlargement. I want to underline that there is a fake contraposition that we need to break, that has been put forward by some of the council leaders. Rightly, I think they say we need to reform how we work before we enlarge. I think they're right. In fact, that's what I was saying all the time today. But I think they're right. But there is no contradiction. We can start the dialogue, the negotiations, while we make this European Union that today, for me, as I said, is a very tired compromise. It cannot work anymore like this. We reform it, okay? Next 2 years, I hope we do it. But why this has to imply that we stop the starting of the formal negotiations, etc.? Because it's not that we had to decide that tomorrow they were joining. We needed to continue the process. And that's why I think we need to not be hypocrites and instead not look, because the truth is that some governments wanted to stop this because it has an electoral impact, but I think we don't need to be hypocrites, and we need to look at the facts that, as was said, the criteria were met. We need to give a signal. Otherwise, we are giving a very bad message to many people, many young people.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have many questions. We had probably a lot of questions, but we have possibility to discuss them afterwards. So the seminar is over, but discussion is not. So thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you very much for the audience. And it has been a very interesting debate throughout the day. Now we'll have more cocktails over there. And so please enjoy the evening, and thank you very much.